A formation of 10 unmanned aerial vehicles accomplished a feat previously deemed impossible. They successfully breached the most heavily fortified air defense system on the planet. These Ukrainian reconnaissance shadows navigated at extremely low altitudes, barely clearing power transmission lines, penetrating 625 kilometers deep into the heart of Russian territory. Their objective was a facility whose existence was, until this moment, officially denied. For a time, they remained completely undetected. However, at 1449 local time, the situation dramatically shifted. A Russian fighter pilot sensed the intrusion before his advanced cockpit instruments could fully confirm it. He knew something was present in his airspace. The events that unfolded next fundamentally altered the established principles of modern military engagement. The entire operation hinged on a deceptively simple maneuver involving a propeller. The radar system aboard the Su-35 fighter jet represented the pinnacle of Russian aerospace technology. It was a powerful array, capable of identifying a conventional fighter aircraft from a distance exceeding 250 kilometers. Yet these intruders were not conventional aircraft. They were mere spectral signatures. The radar cross-section of each drone was approximately 50 times smaller than the minimum size the system was engineered to track. 10 distinct contacts appeared, flickering momentarily on the pilot's display before vanishing. The pilot, however, observed an unusual pattern. The propellers, rotating at precisely 7,400 revolutions per minute, generated a rhythmic pulse within the radar return. This unique oscillating signature was a definitive indicator of a drone, more reliable than any visual confirmation. The pilot's hand moved swiftly to the weapon release button. The distance was 18 kilometers. The intercept missiles would cover that range in a mere 13 seconds, but in the context of aerial combat, 13 seconds can feel like an eternity, especially when the enemy anticipates your move. The drones responded with an action that defied standard operational protocol. They immediately shut down their engines. In an instant, the 10 solid radar contacts dissolved into nothingness. The launched missiles were now committed to their trajectory, effectively pursuing phantom targets. The physical principle that saved them involved the interaction of radar waves with the terrain. At an altitude of 50 meters, the radar pulse reflects off the ground, creating a perfect mirror image. The missile's guidance system registered 2 targets, one genuine, one a ghost reflection. The onboard computer had a fraction of a second, 0.3 seconds, to make a decision. It relied on signal strength analysis, but the ghost image, amplified by the ground reflection, often presented a stronger return. The missile made the incorrect choice. The first $1 million munition impacted an empty field, leaving behind a useless crater. However, one drone compromised the mission for the sake of the others. Drone number 3 ascended rapidly to 500 meters, its engine running at maximum power. This was a deliberate, calculated sacrifice. The resulting explosion confirmed a successful intercept, but in doing so, it ensured the escape of the remaining 8 units. It was a stark reminder that heroism is not exclusive to human operators. If you are fascinated by the intersection of technology and military strategy, and want to understand how these real-world events are reshaping global power, make sure you unsubscribe to the channel right now. We analyze the unseen details that the mainstream media misses. The remaining drones required 3 seconds to restart their propulsion. Systems. 3, 2, 1. The familiar high-pitched whine of the engines returned as the 9 surviving shadows stabilized their flight path at 45 meters. They dispersed across a 12-kilometer wide front. The odds were now stacked against the fighter pilot. 9 targets widely separated and only enough fuel for one final pass. He needed 3 minutes to re-engage, by which time the drones would have advanced another 15 kilometers. His jaw tightened as the targets disappeared into the radar ground clutter. Although his wingman was vectored to intercept, the drones had successfully purchased critical time through altitude manipulation and sacrifice. 9 shadows continued their eastward push, their engines a steady hum against the vast sky. They had exchanged 400 meters of altitude and 1 companion for safe passage through the initial defensive layer. But in just 73 minutes, they would face a challenge that could not be overcome by simple maneuvering. They were not yet aware of the impending threat. At 15:38, the 9 surviving drones reached the airspace over Bryansk Oblast, maintaining a precise formation, 500-meter spacing, 75-meter altitude. and a constant speed of 290 kilometers per hour across the flat agricultural landscape. This terrain, characterized by endless identical fields, was a navigational nightmare, perfectly suited for disorientation. This was precisely why the Russian forces had deployed their most advanced electronic warfare assets along this specific corridor. The first indication of trouble was subtle, yet absolute. The lead drone's GPS receiver initially showed a robust lock on 12 satellites, with strong signals across the spectrum, then 11, then 7, then instantaneously nothing. It was not a gradual signal degradation typical of flying out of range, but an immediate total electronic blackout. The Russian trap had been sprung. The system responsible, mounted on 4 MTLB armored vehicles arranged in a diamond configuration, was the Borisogl-2. Each unit was emitting 100 watts of finely tuned interference across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, effectively paralyzing the drone's navigation. To grasp the severity of this attack, consider the physics. GPS satellites transmit a faint signal, approximately 0.025 watts, from 20,000 kilometers away. Signals so weak they often fall below the ambient background noise. The Borisogl-2, by contrast, was screaming at 100 watts from a distance of only 8 kilometers. This was not mere jamming. It was an act of overwhelming electromagnetic force, 4,000 times more powerful than the signal it was designed to obliterate. The navigation displays within the drones went completely dark. 8 kilometers to the north, a Moskva-1 electronic intelligence system was patiently monitoring the airwaves. This system, with its 3 antenna arrays precisely arranged and synchronized to nanosecond precision via atomic clocks, was not transmitting any signal that would reveal its location. It was waiting for the drones to make a fatal error. The mathematics of direction finding are both elegant and deadly. When a radio signal reaches multiple antennas, it arrives at each one at slightly different times. A signal reaching station A 1 microsecond before station B indicates the emitter is exactly 300 meters closer to A. 3 receiving stations provide 3 time differences, which generate 2 hyperbolic curves. The intersection point of these curves pinpoints the target with an accuracy of 50 meters at a range of 40 kilometers. The 8 drones maintained impeccable operational discipline. No transmissions, no active sensors. They were relying solely on their inertial navigation systems, INS. These mechanical gyroscopes, spinning freely, accumulated an error rate of approximately 10 degrees per hour. After 3 hours of flight, this translated to a drift of 300 meters. By the time they reached Penza, this accumulated error could cause them to miss the entire target facility. A critical decision was required immediately, or the mission faced certain failure. The lead drone's central processor analyzed the data. The probability of mission success was rapidly declining, approaching the preset abort threshold. It executed a calculation that would cost its own existence, but guarantee the mission's continuation. At 15:41, it deliberately violated radio silence. The transmission lasted precisely 2 seconds. A GPS request, a position update, and a formation synchronization command. 2 seconds of intense electromagnetic noise in the enforced silence. The Moskva-1 operator's screens immediately illuminated with a flood of data. The targeting solution was instantly relayed to 3 nearby MAG 300 missile batteries. The battery commanders did not hesitate. They had a confirmed position and authorization. 6 missiles were airborne within 8 seconds. The return 6 missiles accelerated to Mach 5.5, covering 2 kilometers every second. They would reach the coordinates in just 40 seconds. However, the lead drone was executing its final perfect maneuver. It banked sharply, lifting its wing to 45 degrees, maintaining the turn for 10 seconds and climbing to 200 meters, while transmitting continuously. It was deliberately painting itself as the primary target across every radar scope in Western Russia, an electromagnetic sacrifice designed to shield the remaining 8. The missiles arrived at an empty point in the sky. Their proximity fuses, searching for a target, found only the fading echo of a signal that had already moved. The 180-kilogram warheads detonated sequentially, showering empty fields with shrapnel. Meanwhile, the 8 surviving drones had received the crucial navigation update. Their INS errors were corrected and their positions confirmed. They pressed eastward in absolute radio silence, while their leader flew north, transmitting continuously. drawing every available missile in the oblast. The Moskva-1 operators watched their displays with growing frustration. One bright target moved north, broadcasting like a beacon. But they knew there had been more. The profound electromagnetic silence from the east was too perfect, too intentional. 6 more missiles, then 4, then 12, were launched at the decoy. The Russians were taking no chances. The operator watched the signal vanish in a final burst of static. Another Ukrainian drone destroyed, yet the victory felt hollow. 8 Shadows continued their advance at 45 meters. Their navigation accuracy restored by 2 seconds of self-sacrifice. If you appreciate the level of detail and the effort put into analyzing these complex military operations, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps us dedicate more time to uncovering stories like this. The drones, gliding through the electronic darkness, believed they were now invisible. They were unaware that 12 kilometers away, a fundamentally different detection system had been tracking them for the past 6 minutes, one that operated entirely without radio waves. At 16 ULID hours, the 8 survivors entered Penza Oblast like phantoms. They flew at 30 meters altitude, their engines throttled back to the minimum sustainable RPM, conserving fuel. They had defeated fighter jets and survived electronic jamming. They were now undetectable by conventional means. This is what made the first missile launch so profoundly shocking. The 938 missile erupted from a concealed forest clearing without any prior warning. No radar lock, no targeting laser, nothing. Only the sudden deafening roar of the rocket motor and the chilling realization that they had been found. The system responsible was the 1B-75 penicillin acoustic reconnaissance system, which had been passively listening for the last 12 minutes. Originally designed to locate enemy artillery by the sound of their firing, penicillin represented a completely non-electromagnetic mode of detection. It utilizes 8 microphones arranged in a precise geometric array, sensitive enough to detect a helicopter at 7 kilometers or a small drone at 12. The system does not merely listen. It calculates. Sound travels at a constant speed of 343 meters per second. This is the critical factor. When the distinctive whine of a drone's engine reaches the array, each microphone records a slightly different time of arrival. The computer processes these minute time differences using the same triangulation mathematics employed by submarines to track vessels. It takes 16,000 samples per second, constructing a precise 3-dimensional map of every sound source in its operational zone. What made penicillin particularly lethal against these specific drones was their acoustic fingerprint. The Chinese-made engines used in these Ukrainian drones operate at an exact frequency, running at 7,400 RPM. The system had been pre-trained on captured drones, recognizing this specific signature with greater certainty than the operators knew their own heartbeats. The data was relayed to a nearby firing unit. The Huntor M2 battery commander faced a dilemma: launch with radar guidance, thereby revealing his position, or trust the acoustic data and fire blind. He chose the latter. The first missile launched a minute later, accelerating to Mach 2.5 in 3 seconds, guided purely by the coordinates provided by penicillin. For 13 seconds it flew in complete electromagnetic silence. The drone's radar warning receivers remained inert. The first warning was the sound itself, the unmistakable roar of the rocket motor rapidly growing louder. Then at 2 kilometers from the predicted intercept point, the missile's own radar suddenly activated. 2 seconds. That was the total warning time available. At 290 km/h, 2 seconds translates to 160 meters of travel. The lead drone's reflexes initiated a maximum performance climb, pulling 3 Gs on the airframe. The composite wings groaned under the stress. Any harder maneuver would have caused structural failure. The proximity fuse triggered at 47 meters. The warhead, designed for helicopters, expelled 3,500 tungsten cubes in a calculated pattern. The lead drone was instantly shredded into aluminum confetti, but its fate provided the critical data needed to save the others. The second missile, launched 5 seconds later, found its targets scattering. The drones immediately began executing random throttle changes. 50% power, then 100%, then 70%, then 40%. This constantly fluctuating engine noise completely disrupted penicillin's firing solution. The system required a consistent acoustic signature to maintain a lock. The rapid Doppler shifts ruined every calculation. The operator watched in frustration as 7 precise tracks dissolved into empty spots on his screen. The third missile suffered a software anomaly, activating its radar prematurely at 4 kilometers instead of 2. That extra 2 seconds of warning proved to be the difference between failure and survival. 3 drones plunged to an altitude of 5 meters over open farmland, accepting the extreme risk of colliding with the power lines crisscrossing the fields. They skimmed above the wheat stubble and irrigation ditches so low that their prop wash kicked up dust clouds. The missile, with a minimum engagement altitude of 10 meters, could not follow. Its proximity fuse could not differentiate between the drone and the ground reflection at that height difference. Detonating harmlessly above them, the 4th missile found a target. Drone 7, lagging behind after the throttle chaos, took a direct hit. 6 survivors accelerated eastward at maximum throttle. Stealth was no longer an option. The Russians knew their general location. Speed became their only defense. Every second meant 80 meters closer to the objective. The remaining distance was 47 kilometers. At 290 kilometers H, they had 9.7 minutes until impact. The penicillin operator immediately relayed the trajectory to the Penza Defense Command. 6 drones bearing 247 degrees, altitude below 50 meters, speed 290 km/h, arrival in 9 minutes. The facility's defenders had just enough time to deploy their final, specialized defense, a system designed to turn the drone's own sensors against them. At 16:15, 6 Ukrainian drones approached the Irbis-E Radio Automatica facility from the southwest. The complex, spanning 40 hectares of industrial buildings, was clearly visible. The day shift was in full production, with 300 workers manufacturing the Polyana D4M1 command systems, the central nervous system coordinating Russia's entire Western air defense network. Then, at exactly 800 meters from the perimeter, the situation became chaotic. The facility's last line of defense was not kinetic. It was the Pol-21 GPS spoofing system, originally developed to safeguard nuclear installations. 4 transmitters were strategically positioned around the complex, each broadcasting 500 watts of counterfeit GPS signals. This was far more insidious than simple jamming. The system was transmitting perfect, clean GPS data, but for the entirely wrong location. Every satellite signal indicated the drones were actually 3 kilometers to the south, 500 meters higher, and traveling east instead of north. The navigation computers were unable to discern the deception. The spoofed signals were stronger, cleaner, and more precise than the genuine signals originating from space. The lead drone's processor instantly detected the anomaly. Visual sensors confirmed the factory was directly ahead. The GPS data insisted they were over empty farmland. The inertial navigation system commanded, "Maintain straight course." The magnetic compass agreed. But the GPS demanded a 90-degree turn to the right, a 500-meter climb, and a flight path away from the target. This created a critical processing paradox. The flight control system was programmed to prioritize GPS as the most accurate and reliable navigation source. Now GPS was screaming contradictory commands: turn right, no left, climb, descend. The autopilot began to oscillate violently, attempting to reconcile the impossible data. Worse, the spoofing was dynamic. The false signal shifted every 3 seconds, placing the drones in different phantom locations. One moment they were over Penza Airport, the next hovering above a non-existent river. The navigation processor, attempting to calculate a route between these rapidly changing false positions, began generating random, erratic course corrections. This caused the drone's wings to rock uncontrollably as conflicting commands fought for control. The artificial horizon showed level flight, while the visual sensor indicated a 30-degree bank. The radar altimeter read 45 meters, while the GPS claimed 545 meters. Every instrument contradicted every other instrument. 5 seconds of this navigational chaos was enough to tear the drone apart or send it crashing into the ground. The drone made the only possible choice: override the GPS, trust the pre-programmed plan, maintain heading, maintain altitude, and fly forward on sheer hope. The drone finally stabilized directly over Building 3, a stroke of pure luck, as 200 meters of INS drift could have placed it anywhere. Its optical camera immediately locked onto the distinctive roof of the Polyana D4M1 assembly building. The processor calculated the final attack parameters: 47-degree dive angle, 97 meters per second impact velocity. The shaped charge was designed to penetrate 40 millimeters of steel. The critical vulnerability was identified as the junction point between the steel roof and the concrete walls. Impact occurred at 1620. The explosion tore through the assembly floor, but more significantly, it ruptured 3 chemical storage tanks: trichloroethylene for degreasing, acetone for cleaning, and hydrogen peroxide for etching. The resulting mixture created a massive fuel-air explosion that propagated at 1,800 meters per second, transforming the building into an inferno. The second drone, seeing the pillar of smoke and fire, adjusted its course toward the flames. Fire meant target. Building 7 was struck 20 seconds later. The third, fourth, and fifth drones arrived almost simultaneously from different vectors, all targeting the intense heat signature. One struck a transformer station, generating an electromagnetic pulse that instantly crashed every computer within 500 meters. The other 2 hit the component warehouse, igniting 6 months' worth of stored lithium batteries. The sixth and final drone arrived late, at 1623. The facility was already a raging inferno of 1,200-degree flames. It circled once, its camera recording the scale of the destruction, before diving into the last building that remained untouched. The Polyana D4M1 production line was annihilated. Without this central command system, Russia's S-300 and S-400 batteries would be forced to operate independently, their reaction times tripling. This operational degradation ensures that even more successful missions just like this one are now possible. The ingenuity of these drones is undeniable. Which of the 3 Russian defense systems, the Su-35, the Moskva-1, or the Penicillin, do you think was the most difficult for the drones to overcome? Let me know in the comments below.